saying the heck they do.
I want people to really think about what it means to be pro-war. And when somebody says they're pro-war, what are they really saying? On Saturday at our demonstration, I watched as pro-war nationalists cheered for the death of Iraqi civilians.
All the names of them are on the...
I watched as pro-war nationalists cheered at the idea of Lieutenant Aaron Watada, a war resistor, being raped in jail. I watched as pro-war nationalists cheered as we read off the names of 200 Iraqis who died during shock and awe. That's what being pro-war means. It's one thing to say you support the troops and the men and women in uniform. If you do, that is fine. But being in favor of a war means you're in favor of death. It means you're in favor of bombings. It means you're in favor of murder, of rape, and of pillaging. Even if the soldiers don't do the murder, they still facilitate, because of the occupation, a situation where murder happens. There were no car bombings in Baghdad before the occupation. There were no armed militias in Baghdad before the occupation. The people of Iraq have a cultural tradition that goes back over 1,000 years that we are systematically destroying through arrogance and ignorance. Now, a lot of people act like that's not important. And I have to think that when they say that the deaths of Iraqis aren't important or marginalize their deaths, it's got a lot to do with the color of the Iraqis. The war in Iraq and this failed occupation would not be allowed to happen in a European nation. The war in Iraq and the occupation would not be allowed to happen in a nation whose population was predominantly white. The war in Iraq is a racist occupation. It is an imperialist occupation. It is an economic occupation which affects disproportionately people of the Muslim religion and people of color. And if you are blind to that fact, you need to open your eyes to that. I myself am a middle school teacher in Tacoma, and I'm also a veteran of the Air Force. So the next time some pro-war hack goes, "Oh, you don't have a day job," tell them to kick rocks. I taught 5 periods of middle school today, got in my car to drive to Tacoma to be here with you.
Thank you.
Now, war matters. Costs matter. Those $200 million that we spend every day in Baghdad and in Mosul and in Basra mean that we're not rebuilding New Orleans. They mean that we're not funding American schools. It means that the dearth of Pell Grants that is forcing college students into debt grows. It means that textbooks that I use in my classroom that still list the Commonwealth of Independent States in a mostly unified Soviet Union from 1994 don't get replaced. War costs. War costs jobs, war costs lives, war costs money, and war costs opportunity. Now, I have a habit of not talking long, so I'm going to shut up after this. One of the most disturbing things about this occupation is what it's doing to the United States in regards to civil liberties. It seems to me that in the city of Tacoma, the only reason we have SWAT teams are to squash democratic protests. Every day on Wall Street, millions of dollars, especially with the subprime crisis, millions of dollars are being disappeared into the pockets of capitalists and financiers. But let 20 hippies or 20 college kids stand up and bring out the SWAT team. My question for you is, why aren't the police confronting people who are stealing pension funds? People who are foreclosing on houses? Why do we get the police for civil protests? The war in Iraq has destroyed the nation of Iraq, and the war in Iraq is destroying the culture of democracy that we have in the United States. A time to stand and just let this go by has gone and passed. In the last year, I've been studying intensely Martin Luther King Jr., and I will end with this. In his speech Beyond Vietnam, he says that a time comes when silence is betrayal. That time for the war in Iraq has arrived. If you can continue walking up and down the street, or walking around with your iPod, or standing passively looking, and you know what's going on, and you don't do anything. You don't do anything. You don't say how you object. You don't say how horrible it is. You just put a sticker on the back of your car and drive and stay a part of the machine. Then your silence is betrayal. Thank you.
And I want to say that I'm a retired electrician.
I asked him if he knew when the person had died, and he did. And we found...
I've heard a number from the University of Washington that 50% of female recruits in the Marines are raped by their fellow soldiers. Most of them repeatedly. Just when they're trying to go to the bathroom, to get water, whenever they're in constant fear of attack by their own fellow soldiers.
I work at 211, which is a crisis line, and every single day I'm answering close to 100 calls of people who are in a dire situation and are not receiving the assistance that they need from our city, our state, and our federal government.
I'm for peace. I'm not anti-war. I'm for peace.
Yeah.
I am not anti-capitalist. I'm for democracy. And I recognize that capitalism, by concentrating power in the hands of the few, is a threat to democracy.
To put in everybody's ear that we need to think about being our own media. Media is very unlikely to take up our causes and the people's causes. The media has served empire for centuries, and we need to be our own media. I see people here with cameras. I see people taking notes. We need to get our stories out and be the media. It means stepping up and speaking out in ways that might be uncomfortable, and brushing up our writing and speaking and video skills, but this is the way. We have new tools now to make our voices heard.
We need a whole different world, and we need mass resistance to this. This war has to stop. And we got to say, you know what, if you know this stuff is wrong, you need to do something about it. You need to be part of stopping it. It is not okay to sit there and to see these kinds of pictures that we're seeing and for people not to act on them.
But I do want to say, if you haven't tuned in, it's really a great station for getting the news and a lot of information about the world and the world situation, and a lot about the current election. And I knew the answer to 934 lies because I heard it on 1090.
Media lies, people die! Media lies, people die! Hey, hey! Ho, ho! The Portuguese have got to go! Have to go! Hey, hey! Ho, ho! The money for murder, rape, torture, war! What are they recruiting for? Murder, rape, torture, war! What are they recruiting for?
Okay.